This young nurse saved 5 people from death while passing by an accident scene, but she was about to lose her job because of a traffic ticket. When she appeared before Judge Caprio, her story gave chills to everyone who heard it. Sarah Johnson had to park her car to save lives, but she left it in a handicapped parking space. As she was about to lose her job due to the hospital's 3-strike policy, Judge Caprio's decision brought tears to everyone's eyes. Drop a comment where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you believe everyday heroes deserve our support. Providence Municipal Court. Tuesday morning, 10:15. Judge Frank Caprio was preparing to hear his routine daily cases. The courtroom was filled as usual with citizens contesting traffic tickets or defending themselves for minor offenses. As everyone waited for their turn, the court officer announced the next case. Case number 58721. Sarah Johnson, handicapped parking violation. The doors opened and a 29-year-old tired-looking woman wearing a blue hospital uniform entered. Sarah Johnson was a nurse working in the emergency room at St. Mary Hospital. Her dark hair was gathered in a messy bun, and the fatigue on her face revealed her long working hours. In the folder she was holding, documents and her hospital ID card were visible. As Sarah advanced through the courtroom, some people recognized her. The major accident from last week had been widely covered in local news, and the moment Sarah helped had been recorded by an eyewitness and shared on social media. An elderly woman sitting in the back rows whispered to the person next to her, "That's the nurse, the girl who saved people in the accident on Interstate 95. Sarah was walking with her colleague Lisa Martinez, who had come to support her. Lisa was a pediatric nurse at St. Mary Hospital, and wanted to be there as Sarah's close friend. Sarah looked a bit pale and tense. She knew well how this court decision could affect her life. Judge Caprio looked at Sarah's file, and then raised his head to look at the young nurse. "Miss Johnson, you are charged with occupying a handicapped parking space. On Saturday, April 23rd, at 5:45 p.m., you parked your vehicle in a handicapped parking space on Waterfront Drive. How do you respond to this charge?" Sarah approached the bench. Her voice was tired but determined. "I'm guilty, Your Honor, but if you would allow me to explain, I'd like to tell you why I had to park there." Judge Caprio nodded. "Of course, Miss Johnson. Please tell us what happened." Sarah took a deep breath. "That day, I had just finished my afternoon shift, Your Honor. I was going home after working 12 hours in the emergency room. It had been a difficult shift. We had 2 heart attack cases, a delivery, and several severe trauma cases. Normally our shift is 12 hours, but that day I worked 14 hours due to patient volume." Sarah's facial expression became more serious as she remembered that day. "I was driving home via Waterfront Drive. I was tired and just thinking about taking a shower and sleeping. Just then, I saw several vehicles ahead of me suddenly stop. There had been a major traffic accident up ahead. 5 cars had collided." Judge Caprio was listening carefully to Sarah's narrative. "Continue, Ms. Johnson. Since I have first aid training, I immediately pulled over and wanted to help. At that moment, all I could think about was reaching the injured people. The closest spot was a handicapped parking space at the edge of the sidewalk. I parked there and ran to the accident scene." Sarah paused for a moment, her eyes looking into the distance as if reliving that moment. "The accident was very bad, Your Honor. 2 cars were completely crushed and the others were severely damaged. When I reached the first car, there was a young couple inside. The woman was pregnant and trapped. The man was unconscious and bleeding from his head. I told them I was a nurse and tried to calm them down." Sarah's voice started to tremble, but she composed herself and continued. "The pregnant woman was panicking, showing signs of contractions. Early labor could have started due to stress. I calmed her down and showed her proper breathing techniques. At the same time, I assessed her husband's head trauma. He had a deep cut on his head, and if I didn't intervene quickly, he could go into shock from blood loss." The silence in the courtroom deepened with every word Sarah spoke. Judge Caprio was listening to the young nurse carefully, nodding occasionally. "I always carry a first aid kit in my bag. I immediately applied pressure to the man's wound and controlled the bleeding. At the same time, I provided neck immobilization to prevent a possible spinal cord injury. This couple was Jennifer and Michael Taws. Jennifer was 8 months pregnant and very scared. Sarah looked at Lisa for a moment, as if drawing strength from her friend. Then I ran to the other cars. In the second car, there was an elderly couple, Ruth and George Wilson. Ruth was experiencing chest pain, showing signs of a heart attack. I checked her pulse. It was irregular, and she was sweating. George was panicking, afraid of losing his wife. I helped them get out of the vehicle and took Ruth to a safe place. I told her to chew an aspirin and constantly checked her consciousness. When I looked at the third car, there was a young man inside, David Collins. He had gone into shock and was refusing to get out of the car. I approached him with calming words, trying to build trust. Finally, I convinced him to get out of the car and took him to a safe area. Judge Caprio asked while taking notes, "Did you also help the people in the other vehicles?" "Yes, Your Honor." In the fourth car, there were Maria Gonzalez and her 8-year-old daughter, Sophia. Sophia's arm seemed broken, and she was crying. Maria's lip was split, and her nose was bleeding. I got them out of the vehicle as well and stabilized Sophia's arm. I told her stories to distract her and helped her calm down. Sarah continued. In the fifth car was Richard Williams, a man in his 40s. He was in the worst condition. His car was completely crushed, and he was trapped. He was having difficulty breathing and was probably experiencing internal bleeding. It was difficult to reach him, but by partially entering the car, I checked his vital signs. I talked to him, trying to keep him conscious. "Richard, my name is Sarah. I'm a nurse. Help is on the way. Please hang on," I kept saying. After a while, the emergency services arrived, and I handed the situation over to them. I gave a quick briefing about each injured person, their vital signs, my observations, and the interventions I had made. I stayed at the accident scene for about 45 minutes, working with the paramedics. Then they told me I could go. When I returned to my car, I found the ticket on my windshield. Judge Caprio nodded, taking notes. "I understand, Miss Johnson. You were there to help in an emergency situation." "Yes, Your Honor. Under normal circumstances, I would never park in a handicapped space. But at that moment, my only thought was to help the injured people. There was no time to look for another spot." Judge Caprio looked at Sarah and asked, "Miss Johnson, do you have any documents or witnesses that can confirm you helped at the accident?" Sarah pulled a paper from her bag. "Yes, Your Honor. Here's a letter I received from the ambulance team. Also, my name is mentioned in the accident report." The court officer took the document and handed it to Judge Caprio. The judge read the letter carefully. The letter was signed by Chief Paramedic Robert Torres from Providence Emergency Medical Services and confirmed that Sarah Johnson had provided professional assistance at the accident on April 23, saving the lives of at least 2 people. Sarah pulled out another document. "Also, Your Honor, there's a letter from Richard Williams. He was the most severely injured person in the accident. When the paramedics arrived, Richard's internal bleeding had reached a serious level. If I hadn't been there and provided first aid, he could have died from blood loss." Judge Caprio also read the second letter. Richard Williams wrote in his letter that he was grateful to Sarah, that he survived because of her, and that his 3 children didn't lose their father. Judge Caprio raised his head. "Miss Johnson, this letter signed by Mr. Torres says that your intervention saved at least 2 lives. Mr. Williams also expresses his gratitude to you. This is extraordinary." Sarah modestly bowed her head. "I was just doing my job, Your Honor. Any nurse would have done the same. We are trained for this." Lisa Martinez, Sarah's friend, stood up to speak. "Your Honor, if I may say something. I'm Sarah's colleague at St. Mary Hospital. Sarah is very humble, but I want you to know that she is one of the most special nurses among us. She always puts patients first, goes the extra mile during the COVID epidemic, even when protective equipment was insufficient. She worked on the front lines. She even refused to see her family, staying in a hotel for months to avoid transmitting the virus. She's a hero, Your Honor. Not just that day, but every day. Judge Caprio thanked Lisa and turned back to Sarah. Miss Johnson, is there another reason you came to court to avoid paying this fine? It's noteworthy that you took time off and came here for a $100 fine. Sarah's facial expression changed, and her eyes welled up. Actually, there is, Your Honor, she said with a trembling voice. At the hospital where I work, there's a 3-strike policy. If you receive 3 traffic tickets, your employment can be terminated. This would be my 3rd ticket. Expressions of surprise spread through the courtroom. Judge Caprio frowned. Are you saying you could lose your job over 3 traffic tickets? Yes, Your Honor. According to hospital policy, employees are required to demonstrate public responsibility and respect. 3 traffic tickets mean we don't meet these standards. I had 2 tickets before, one for exceeding the speed limit, the other for not coming to a complete stop at a stop sign. Sarah continued, her voice trembling a bit. My first ticket was 3 years ago. There was a patient in critical condition at the hospital who urgently needed a blood transfusion. I volunteered to bring blood from the blood bank. On the way back, since blood deteriorates very quickly, I exceeded the speed limit. My second ticket was last year when I was returning home after my night shift. I was very tired at 4 a.m. and didn't come to a complete stop at a stop sign. There was no one around, but a police officer saw me and pulled me over. And this 3rd ticket could cause you to lose your job, said Judge Caprio, beginning to understand the seriousness of the situation. Yes, Your Honor. I love my job at St. Mary. I can really make a difference for patients there. If I lose my job, it will be a major blow, not just financially, but emotionally too. Nursing isn't just a job for me. It's a way of life. Judge Caprio thoughtfully took notes. And how long have you been working at this hospital, Miss Johnson? For 7 years, Your Honor. I started working at St. Mary right after graduating from nursing school. I work in the emergency room, and I love my job. Our team is like a family. Our patients trust us. I don't want to let them down. Judge Caprio seemed impressed by Sarah's sincerity. And have you ever had any work-related disciplinary issues before? No, Your Honor. My performance evaluations have always been excellent. Last year, I was nominated for the Nurse of the Year award by the hospital. Actually, I came in second, Dr. Peterson won, Lisa interjected. And that was only for political reasons, Your Honor. Everyone knew Sarah deserved it. Judge Caprio smiled slightly, and then became serious again. Judge Caprio smiled slightly, and then became serious again. Miss Johnson, is this hospital policy written down? Can I see this document? Sarah pulled another paper from her folder. Yes, Your Honor. Here's the relevant section from the hospital's personnel handbook, page 42, section 8.3. The court officer took the document and gave it to Judge Caprio. After reading the document, the judge shook his head. This is indeed a written policy. It seems quite strict. As he continued to read the document, Judge Caprio's brows furrowed. This handbook states, Street Point Mary Hospital employees must demonstrate high ethical standards in the community. 3 or more traffic violations are considered inappropriate behavior and may result in termination of employment. Is there no exception to this policy for emergencies? Sarah shook her head. No, Your Honor. The policy is quite definite. The Human Resources Director, Ms. Henderson, said the rules apply to everyone. However, she wanted to wait for this case before making a final decision. Just as Judge Caprio was about to ask another question, a voice rose from the back of the courtroom. Your Honor, may I say something? Everyone turned around. A middle-aged man had stood up. His face still had healing cuts and bruises, and he had a large bandage on his head. A pregnant woman was sitting next to him, presumably his wife. I'm Michael Torres, Your Honor. I'm the man from the couple injured in that accident. My wife Jennifer was 8 months pregnant. When Ms. Johnson reached us, I was unconscious and bleeding from my head. Doctors said I could have suffered brain damage if it weren't for her quick intervention. Judge Caprio allowed the man to speak. Please approach, Mr. Torres. Michael Torres advanced to the front of the courtroom. The bandage on his head was still there, and he had a slight limp as he walked. His wife, Jennifer, was walking beside him. She was heavily pregnant and having difficulty walking. However, there was deep gratitude on her face towards Sarah. Ms. Johnson saved my life and our son's life, Your Honor. My wife gave birth the day after the accident. We had a little boy. Both are healthy because that nurse stopped to help us. Jennifer spoke to support her husband. I had panicked after the accident, Your Honor. I was afraid of losing our baby. Miss Johnson calmed me down, helped me breathe properly, and checked the baby's heartbeat. She also looked after my husband. She was able to care for both of us at the same time. It was incredible that someone who just happened to be passing by could act so professionally. Michael continued. Miss Johnson told us that her shift had just ended that day. She had worked for 12 hours but still stopped to help us. She stayed at the accident scene for more than 45 minutes, calming us down and providing first aid until the ambulance arrived. She's a hero, Your Honor. And now she's facing the risk of losing her job because of this. That's not fair. Everyone in the courtroom was moved by Michael Torres' story. Some in the back rows were wiping away tears. Michael Torres pulled a photo from his pocket and handed it to Judge Caprio. This is our son, Jason. My wife and I also gave him the name Sarah, in honor of Ms. Johnson. Judge Caprio examined the photo and smiled. A very beautiful baby, Mr. Torres. And yes, that's a very touching gesture. Sarah was trying to hold back her tears. I met them again at the hospital when checking on the baby. They're a beautiful family. Michael continued. I want you to know, Your Honor, that we're not the only example. I've spoken with the other injured people from the accident scene. Ruth Wilson was having a heart attack, and without Miss Johnson's intervention, she might not be alive. Richard Williams was experiencing internal bleeding. He was in critical condition. If it weren't for Ms. Johnson, his 3 children could have been left without a father. Just then, the courtroom doors opened again, and an elderly couple entered. The woman was in a wheelchair with her husband standing next to her. We are Ruth and George Wilson. The elderly man called out. I'm alive because of that girl. Please don't punish her. Judge Caprio seemed a bit surprised by these unexpected witnesses. Please approach. So, you were also injured in that accident? Yes, Your Honor, said George, pushing his wife's wheelchair. Ruth was having a heart attack. If that young nurse hadn't been there, my wife wouldn't be here now. We've been married for 52 years. I wasn't ready to lose her. Ruth spoke in a weak voice. She came to me like an angel, Your Honor. She helped me get out of the car, calmed me down. She told me to chew an aspirin, which saved my life. The doctors said that aspirin prevented blood clotting and prevented a larger heart attack. Another voice rose. I'm here too, Your Honor. Richard Williams. The man in his 40s who entered was still in the recovery process. He limped as he walked and needed support. Beside him were his 3 children, all looking at Sarah with grateful eyes. I was trapped in the vehicle, Your Honor. I was experiencing internal bleeding. Ms. Johnson partially entered the car to reach me. She told me to keep talking, keeping me conscious. If it weren't for her, my children would have been left without a father. I have 3 children, Your Honor, and they're all here today because Miss Johnson was there that day. Richard's oldest son, 12-year-old James, stepped forward. Miss Johnson saved my dad, Your Honor. She's a superhero. The courtroom was now filled with emotion. Some spectators couldn't hide their tears. Sarah, affected by all these testimonials, was quietly crying. Judge Caprio turned to Sarah. Miss Johnson, you didn't just do your job. You showed humanity. Despite being tired after your shift, you stopped to help others, putting yourself at risk. And now, because of this good-intentioned behavior, you're facing the risk of losing your job. Judge Caprio looked at his file one last time and made his decision. In this case, I see a conflict between the technical application of justice and the spirit of justice. Technically, you occupied a handicapped parking space, but you did this to save other people's lives. The courtroom held its breath, waiting for Judge Caprio's decision. Miss Sarah Johnson, I'm dismissing this case. I'm completely canceling the charge of occupying a handicapped parking space. But more importantly, on behalf of the court, I want to thank you for saving lives and for the sacrifices you make every day. The courtroom erupted in applause. Michael Torres hugged Sarah and thanked her. Ruth Wilson held Sarah's hand from her wheelchair. Richard Williams and his children also embraced Sarah. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished yet. Additionally, I'll be sending a copy of this decision along with a personal letter to St. Mary Hospital. I will describe Ms. Johnson's extraordinary courage and sacrifice, and I will advise the hospital management to reconsider their 3-strike policy. It's unacceptable for behavior done to save lives to cause someone to lose their job. Judge Caprio scanned the courtroom and continued in a serious tone. Also, is St. Mary Hospital's Human Resources Director, Miss Henderson, here? A woman stood up from the back of the room. Yes, Your Honor. I'm here. Miss Henderson, please come forward. The middle-aged, professional-looking woman advanced to the front of the courtroom. From her facial expression, it was clear she was affected by what had transpired. Miss Henderson, is this policy within your authority? Can you change it? Normally, hospital board approval is required, Your Honor. But after what I've seen here today, I can tell you that I'll use all my power to change this policy. Losing a nurse like Miss Johnson would be a great loss for the hospital. She is an example of professional standards and an employee we all take pride in. Judge Caprio nodded with satisfaction. Thank you for your sensitivity, Miss Henderson. I hope the hospital management shows the same understanding. Sarah thanked them with tears in her eyes. Thank you very much, Your Honor, Sarah said, her voice trembling. Not only for dismissing the ticket, but for believing that compassion still matters in this world. Judge Caprio smiled gently. Miss Johnson, it's people like you who remind us what humanity truly means. The world needs more nurses like you, not fewer. You didn't break the law that day. You honored the law of humanity. The courtroom burst into another round of applause. Some even stood up, clapping through their tears. Sarah turned around to face the people she had saved. Michael Torres nodded at her with moist eyes. His wife Jennifer smiled, holding her newborn in her arms. Ruth Wilson, in her wheelchair, lifted her hand in blessing. Richard Williams stood proudly with his children, each of them giving Sarah a small wave. For a moment, the entire courtroom forgot about laws, fines, or policies. What filled the room was gratitude, pure and profound. Judge Caprio looked around the courtroom one last time before speaking. Case dismissed. Miss Johnson, you are free to go, and may God bless you for everything you've done. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. As she walked out of the courtroom, people approached her, shaking her hand, thanking her, hugging her. Outside the courthouse, reporters had already gathered. Someone shouted, Miss Johnson, what do you want to say to the world? Sarah paused, wiping away her tears, and smiled softly. I just want people to remember one thing, she said. When you have a chance to save a life, don't think twice. Laws can wait, but life can't. The cameras clicked, capturing her face, tired yet peaceful, strong yet humble. And as the sun rose over Providence that morning, one courtroom had witnessed something far greater than a dismissed parking ticket. It had witnessed mercy, humanity, and the power of doing what's right, even when the rules say otherwise.